Welcome to this session for open science trainers, where Milica Ševkušić from EIFL will talk about strategies to boost the visibility of researchers, institutions, research outputs, and research activities as a training topic. Over to you, Milica. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Irina. Well, this is, as Irina mentioned in the previous informal talk, this is a talk about marketing for open science trainers. And I will try to explain why I'm using the term visibility. Visibility is, for me, a kind of a buzzword and a really good marketing word that works really well with researchers. And I can't even remember the moment when I started talking about this, and there were several things involved. The main thing is that basically most researchers are not interested in open science as a topic, so they will attend a training about open science if, for example, they have some funding requirements, or if they really have a very specific need related to their project, etc., a very practical reason to attend this training. So, for example, they will attend training about research data management, but then when we are talking about, I don't know, the social aspects of open science, they will try to skip this if they don't have such a project. So it's really difficult to attract them, and it's really difficult to keep their attention and to keep them engaged during such training. So my approach was to try to bring this topic closer to them. And I know that the priority topic for them is impact. So whatever topic we raise during any training, the main question is, does it make an impact? How does this affect my ranking? How does this affect my, I don't know, career development, etc.? And if you want to bring any topic closer to them, you need to take this into account in order to be efficient. So for me, the easiest way was to just make a link between the impact and visibility. And I will explain how I'm doing this, because it's not difficult and it's the easiest switch. So whenever they raise the issue of impact during training, I just make this switch to visibility and basically change their topic, explain to them that in order to achieve impact, they must ensure visibility. So I try to decouple this concept of impact. So they don't really know what it means. They think, okay, it's, high impact factors journals, then I calculate those impact factors, etc. But then when I explain to them that it's not that simple, that they need to be visible on the internet, that, I don't know, publishing in the closed journals doesn't really ensure this visibility, that there is a risk that content won't be found and that people wouldn't cite it, etc. And that there are many technological aspects to this impact and actually visibility. They start listening, and what I actually managed to do is to make this visibility a buzzword for them as well. Especially, for example, when we worked with journal editors, we managed to make progress with them by explaining that actually they need to achieve visibility in order to get impact. And when they realized this, it was possible to make a shift. And it was similar for researchers. And this topic and this approach usually resonates much better with junior researchers, with early career researchers, because they know that they need to accept a certain set of practices throughout their career, that they need to implement strategies. Their senior colleagues, they already have this visibility and the impact, etc. They can rely on some traditionally structures in the society to achieve this, but for young career researchers, it's not that simple. So this topic usually resonates much better with them. So how do I define visibility? So the first thing I try to explain is that the context that they will be working in throughout their career is actually the global internet. So whatever they do, they may attend physical conferences, they may be working in a lab, but basically they will be moving, they will be displaying their results, they will be communicating with the other people in the global internet. So in order to do this efficiently, they need to understand how the global internet works, and they need to understand that there are some technological rules and prerequisites that they need to understand and to use. The other thing that is important is being identifiable as an individual or an institution in the global internet, because researchers, they usually assume, and it's very funny, for example, when we started establishing the CRIS system in Serbia, and they said, well, this is a new system, it will be collecting the information about us from the internet, and they got angry. They said the system was wrong, it was not good enough, because it couldn't identify them. The system didn't know who they were. But how on earth the system could know who they were when you have many people with similar names, with similar institutions, etc. And the internet doesn't really know, and the indexing services don't really know how they can make guesses, but based on algorithms, but they don't know who they are. So they need to make an effort in order to make themselves identifiable. So they need to use some tools and some infrastructures to make themselves identifiable. It's very important to understand, for them to understand which tools are good for this and which are not. So also it's very important to understand that open access is crucial. So people, there is a hyperproduction in science, and people cite what they can find. So if something is paywalled, okay, it will have citations within certain community, but younger people, they are like impatient, and they want to find, if they find a good paper that is in open access, they will cite this paper. They wouldn't, I don't know, pay the dozens of dollars to buy an article. So it's like if you publish in open access, you are more likely to be cited. Being citable is also important. So it's very important to for researchers and for all of us to understand that by putting something on in the global internet, it's not enough. So you need to provide some metadata, some description, something that people need to know what they found. So if you just throw a PDF in the internet, they will find it, but they wouldn't cite it because they don't know what it actually is. So you need to use some technology to make it citable. And also good reputation matters for them. And this is what it's like, that's how I explain visibility to researchers when I do training. So I will show you an approach that actually developed, and it started developing more than 10 years ago. And it wasn't that complex. So the idea of visibility that's how I defined it then, but the coverage of topics was a bit different. So it's actually started with this being identifiable. And at the time when I started doing this, so it was like before the ORCID appeared, I started with training on Scopus and Researcher ID profiles. Because we are subscribed to those databases, and I'm a librarian who often does citation reports, and I'm also doing citation reports for my institution. And for me, it was very important to have data cleaned up in those services. So I started submitting corrections to the Web of Science and Scopus to make those changes, and it improved the visibility of my institution, and it made it easier for me to generate reports for projects, for annual reports, and whatever for citation reports. And I started doing training about this. So Researcher ID was it was like brand new at that time. It was 2008, 2009. It appeared in 2008. And I was actually involved in a focus group that was testing it. I don't know how. I found an announcement in the internet, and I became interested. So when ORCID appeared in 2012, it was nothing new for us. So, for example, my institution, we adopted ORCID. I created ORCID profiles for all of my researchers within, I don't know, 2 months since the emergence of ORCIDs. And we, in Serbia, we had several campaigns and training. So ORCID became really adopted. Now it's sort of mandatory, but even before becoming mandatory, it had been really well adopted among researchers. And I usually say that it is because we framed the training in a proper way. We explained the purpose of it. So that's how it started. And then in 2015, I got a request from a major research institute in Serbia, the biggest one. And they wanted me to adjust this training about being identifiable by adding some other topics, like, for example, where to publish, how to find a journal, how to structure abstracts, how to, use those soft strategies to improve visibility. And that resulted in a training session that usually lasted about 1 hour and a half or 2 hours. That was called the profile of a researcher. And that year or a year later, it was included in training for PhD students that is conducted by our National Library and the National Library Consortium. And that's how, and then I started building on this, being identifiable and knowing where to publish. I started adding the other topics, and especially open science related topics. So from like something that lasted 60 to 90 minutes, it grew into something that could be a full day training. And I'll now explain how I inserted those open science topics into this framework about visibility. So this is a kind of a mapping of these visibility topics and the other topics that you can insert. I know you can also insert the other topics, but it's very suitable. But the umbrella concept is visibility. And you just, set up the scene, and then whatever you present, researchers, institutional leaders as well, they understand that whatever you're showing is actually meant to improve their visibility, and that you are actually providing them ideas and tools how to do this. So they listen very attentively to this, and they are usually very engaged. So those two topics, the context, the global internet, and being findable, they are connected because they are related to technology. So, for example, when I explain where to publish, I'm not talking only about the impact factors, and I'm not talking only about, these research integrity aspects that are really important, how to find a reliable journal, etc. But I'm also trying to point to some technological aspects. For example, if a journal doesn't use persistent identifiers, doesn't use DOIs, for example, those articles are not really easy to cite, and it's very difficult to track their citations, etc. Then if the metadata are not provided properly, search engine optimization is not done properly, it's like very difficult to make this content visible. So this is an obstacle. So there might be a journal that has an impact factor and it's even quite high, but if their website is technologically poor, this will affect researchers' visibility. And I usually just show the page source to see whether there's some embedded metadata, etc. And usually this speaks in favor of open access journals, because there are many open access journals that are building on OJS, Open Journal Systems, that actually ensures this technological minimum. And actually it's not only minimum, you can really optimize it well. So it speaks in favor of some journals that are open access journals, that are rather new, that are made by people who understand technology. And this usually helps researchers make some decisions in favor of, so they learn how to check whether the metadata are there, whether PIDs are there, etc. Then using repositories, this is a crucial topic, and it's a recurring topic. So we explain how repositories disseminate research outputs, and I usually explain the role and the meaning of open infrastructure and the role of metadata. It's really easy to explain with repositories. So I explain how they are connected with aggregators and how they actually help and how they improve visibility. So it's very easy to find examples, for example, of the same piece of work, research, and it's usually, I usually use not a journal article, but for example, a shabby conference proceeding that is uploaded to a repository, and then it's visible in Google Scholarly, in various aggregators, etc. So this is how to show how repositories disseminate content. I also explained the benefits of repositories versus social media. So I don't speak against social media, but I prioritize, I suggest researchers that they should prioritize open infrastructure, and then if they have time, they can deal with social media as well. But basically, I show how repositories are more efficient than social media. Preprints work. This is an emerging topic that works really well with young career researchers. So when they realize that these preprints can ensure an early visibility for their research, they really start liking this topic. And I usually get many questions about preprints, an increasing number of questions about preprints. And also about repositories. So, for example, when I work with young career researchers and they don't have a real permanent employment, I usually show Zenodo, and I usually get many questions about Zenodo, and they get really enthusiastic about it. So it's a repository that is free for everyone to use, and it's maintained by CERN, and it's funded by the European Commission. So it assigns DOIs to any content that is uploaded there, so they really become interested. And sometimes even if the session is longer, I usually get feedback that some of them try to upload something to Zenodo, and I get a feedback that they actually saw how they got a DOI and explain how easy it is. So it's a good like a good trump card to play on. Then it's also very important to explain that linking various research outputs using persistent identifiers is a good strategy, and I show some examples to do this. And it's closely related to open science, because, you know, if you publish research data and you have pre-registered reports, etc., and you connect this via PIDs to published papers, this is this is not open science proper, but you are actually building upon open science outputs and strategies to explain how they can get benefits. Then being identifiable, I already explained, these are RORs, ORCIDs for researchers, RORs for institutions. Then the other identifiers that are used in various commercial databases, so Scopus and Web of Science Researcher ID can be registered for free, and it's good for researchers to have them. So I explain this as well, because, you know, we have to take reality into account. And then social networks for researchers, and I explained the line of priorities. So first ORCID, then those Scopus and WOS, and then you can go to social media. Also, when I talk to institutional leaders or librarians, I explain how to fix errors in institutional profiles in Scopus ID. Well, I guess this is not for free. This is just for those who have access to Scopus. And then also linking institutions and researchers' outputs, how they can make use of repositories, how they can generate publication listings from repository and put on institutional websites, how to correct institutions in various databases. So that's these are some of the topics that I cover. And also I usually suggest that they should prioritize repositories, and actually they don't need to update the long listings of their publications of the website. If they have a repository, they can provide a link to the institutional repository. Then open access to research outputs. This is where I usually put the greatest deal of open science related topics, so using repositories again. Then finding a good journal, preferably Diamond Open Access journals. Sometimes I cover this more extensively depending on the audience and that they desires. And I will share a presentation with links. So I'm not now giving examples because I included them in the presentation that I will share. Then open research practices. I provide an overview of open research practices and give examples how this boosts visibility. And here, when I'm explaining this, I usually focus on the quantity of and the diversity of research outputs. So it's not like I'm not focusing on the social benefits of open science, because they want impact. They don't really want to listen about this. But I simply explain that if you adopt open science practices, you actually create a number of outputs that can be shared. So it's not just publications, it's data, it's preprints, blog posts, conference papers, posters, whatever. So there is a diversity of research outputs, and you share more and you disseminate more, and you are using open infrastructure to disseminate more. So you are improving the probability of your work being observed, spotted on the internet, and also cited. So this usually works quite well with researchers. And then preprints, this is usually one of the main topics, and this linking of research output. So you see how different topics recur, and how they actually map very nicely against this visibility concept. Then being citable, I usually explain that they need to publish in venues that have PIDs, and they curate metadata. So repositories are really a good place to publish research, because metadata and PIDs are usually provided by repositories. And I provide some examples that, for example, staff cited in uploaded to a repository get some citations, unexpected citations, for example, for books, because Google Scholar shows citations for books, and we can, if our repository is harvested by Google Scholar, we can show that there are citations. Then I usually explain that in repositories, metadata are curated, while in social media, it's not really, it's what researchers put there. So repositories provide much more information to those who want to cite somebody's work. And then this linking is also important, because if somebody published data and there is a link to a paper in a data set and vice versa, this also increases the probability of being cited. So you see this technological aspect is present there, and they realize that it's not just throwing something into the internet. They need to take some action. They need to know how to use the metadata, how to use persistent identifiers, how to use the infrastructure. Good reputation, this is where I include the social responsibility, research integrity, reproducibility aspects of open research practices. So that's where I explain this, and I actually make this connection with visibility again. So it's not like doing open science for the sake of social responsibility, but it's actually paying attention to social responsibility in order to improve somebody's good standing in the global internet, in the research community. So that's how I actually am selling this topic to them. The personal identifiers, I will explain on a concrete example later on how I'm making a connection between personal identifiers and ORCIDs. And of course, social media, this is where I include this topic of social media, because they need to know how to use social media in a clever way, what to prioritize and how to communicate and how to structure their posts, and not to waste time of something that is not really necessary. So this is a kind of a training outline. So there is an introduction, then I usually talk first about identifiers, then about open science practices, publishing strategy, social media and outreach, and sometimes I include a specific topic, for example, like half an hour presentation about the benefits of repositories. So this is, in this structure, it's embedded in several places, but sometimes I use it as a separate topic. And now I will show you an example, and it's a recent example from last month. I was in Lithuania giving training for PhD students, and it is very similar to a training given to PhD students in Serbia in May. So this is the concept. It's you can reuse anything you like. This is a concept that I did for myself for the training. So I try to map topics and create a plan. And I used some interactive tools. I won't focus on them now. And this is the presentation. So I will show you the first. You can reuse the presentation. It's under a CC BY license, and you can reuse the slides freely. And I will show you an exercise that I did for this to make a connection between reputation and persistent identifiers. So I did this exercise many times when I did training about this researcher profile and being identified for Serbian researchers, and it really works quite well. So I usually try to find a name of a researcher that is not unique. So there are several researchers that have a similar name, and I provide the information to researchers and tell them, I will give you the name and you find this anything you can find about this person, and you can use any strategies you like. So you can use social media, you can use ORCID, you can use repositories, you can use Google, whatever strategies are allowed. And I usually try to find a tricky name, usually a person who might be associated with some unethical practices. I usually use Retraction Watch for this, or I don't know, some news or social media. Sometimes it's quite troublesome. It's quite time consuming to find a good example. So, for example, I found this Japanese researcher, and I usually find a problematic name, but I'm not pointing to a person who actually made the problems, but the person who is okay. And I say, can you find the information? And then they start searching, and the first thing I want them to realize is that they don't have a sufficient amount of information, so they need more information. But some of them don't realize this. They just come up with whatever they found. And they say, well, I found this and that person, etc. And they say, well, this is not, usually this is not the right person. I say, this is not the right person, etc. And then I ask them whether they need additional information. And from this is a good icebreaker, because early on during training, I realized what they don't know. For example, I learned during this exercise whether they've heard of ORCID, whether they've used it, whether they take this into account. And I also learned something about their attitude to social media. For example, there are researchers who usually go to LinkedIn to find, which is not, for me, this is not the most intuitive strategy, but for some of them it is. Some go to Twitter, or sometimes I really come across really interesting search strategies. Most go to Google, or I don't know if they have access to Scopus. So I provided them the name, and I provided them the country and the discipline. And there were actually 2 or 3 persons, and one of them was associated with major misconduct, and he committed suicide some years ago. But I was looking for another person, and here we discovered a very interesting case, that this person had 2 ORCIDs, actually duplicate records. So ORCID is not always enough. And it was only through this Japanese database that we managed to discover that this was the same person. So it was an interesting exercise. I usually give them like 15 minutes. It's usually enough, 15 to 20 minutes to figure this out. And after that, they've really realized that there is a strong connection between visibility and also between reputation, because it becomes, if they know that it's possible that there is a person that has a similar name or a same name who did something wrong, they will be more likely to keep their ORCIDs updated to make sure that they are properly identified. So this really works well for me. So now I will go to another exercise that I did, so I can go through the presentation just for you to see what I used. So I explained these identifiers. This was the first part. Then I gave an example of my colleague from my institute, and I explained the structure of ORCIDs, how to fill out the profile. Sometimes when we have more time, we do a dedicated workshop where they can create ORCIDs if they don't have them. So it's usually time consuming, but for example, sometimes I do dedicated trainings for this, and sometimes they last for 2 or 3 hours. And also you can combine this if you have access to the Scopus and Web of Science. You can run actually a workshop how to improve and how to correct the metadata, author data there, and how to set up profiles there. So I sometimes combine this with this type of training. Then I explain how to add the outputs that don't have a DOI to ORCID profiles using repositories usually, and or Google Scholar. So this is also quite technical, and how to export data to show what they can do with this, and how ORCIDs are integrated with platforms where they can be found, how they can improve this metadata, and also how they're connected with those commercial databases. And this is from the website of my institution, how to make the best use of all those identifiers by displaying them on researcher profiles on the website. Then I will switch to another topic. This is all about identifiers. So you see it's quite extensive. It usually takes a full hour just to go through these without practical work, just to go through these examples. Then using open science practices. This is just a brief overview of the benefits of open science, what it includes, and I usually explain I use different approaches. So for example, in this training, sometimes I give a more detailed overview of each element of open science. In this training, I use the concept of workflow, and I try to explain how they can basically publish something throughout the research life cycle. So here the focus is on the diversity of stuff they can share, they can disseminate, and how it improves the probability of being visible and cited. So, but sometimes I use different approaches. And then I explain the technical part, the technical aspects that they need to understand. It's very basic, open licenses, why it's important to use open licenses. Then the tools, using free and open source tools, and how those tools can help them disseminate their content and improve the quality of their work. Sometimes this section is shorter. It depends on the audience. So if I work with like depends on the structure of the, for example, if they are early on in the early stages of writing their PhD thesis, I tend to shorten this infrastructure part. If they are closing to the end, being closer to the end of the process, I insist on those technical elements, and also if they are already established researchers, I try to explain those technical elements more. And it's important also if they're like research leaders, then I explain the infrastructure elements more, because they need to instruct the others, so they need to be more familiar with it. So it depends on the audience. Then I explained the societal aspects, and citizen science is also an emerging topic. So early career researchers usually get interested in citizen science. So I briefly explained this, but you can build upon this topic if you're like a sort of an expert or you have more experience about this. Then developing publishing and outreach strategies. It's usually about choosing a journal and what can be published, increasing the diversity of outputs. Then I use those interactive elements. I'll skip this now. I provide some tips, and I usually try to make this quite short. I just share the resources about finding a trustworthy journal. But sometimes if the audience requires this, we can, like, if they provide this information in advance, this section can be expanded. So it can be longer, for example, and I shorten the infrastructure part and I explain more about journals. This is about finding a journal, different types of open access, using repositories. I usually try to highlight repositories and I'm on open access, and this is Zenodo. Then explain the citation advantage of open science and how repositories, you've seen this already many times, how repositories disseminate content and how open access journals disseminate content. Share something about sharing data, some tips. And pre-registration, I explained this only briefly. If I don't work with, for example, medical researchers or psychologists, they usually tend to use pre-registration more. So if I work with the other disciplines, I just mentioned this. If I work, I talk more about this. If I work with certain disciplines and I cover preprints, so this usually is covered well with, there are many questions about this. Some examples about preprints. And then the last time I like to share some success stories. So the last time I shared the story about my colleague from Belgrade, Alexandra. This is really a success story because she is a PhD student and she is very much involved in open science, and she actually won a prestigious award last year. So it's like I like talking about this because I know different stages of her career. So I've known her for some years, and sometimes I use different examples from different disciplines. And it's always good if you have such an example that you know personally, so that you can like share reliable details then and share some details about their struggles, about their efforts in the community. It's good to have this example because it resonates really well with researchers, and it encourages them, and it actually shows that by doing so. She had this article in Nature, how a boring administrative task transformed my PhD career, and it's like just the kind of title that really works well in this type of training, so that there are some unexpected benefits of this dedication to open science. And then I usually have this discussion, practicing of open science. Then outreach, I briefly explain social media and various strategies like presence in, I don't know, traditional media and writing blog posts. I'm explaining this concept of Web 2.0, how it actually led to social media and why it matters. So for me, it's very important for them to understand the context, how we came there. And blogs, examples of researchers who are having well visited blogs, and this is a good platform for blog posts, for microblogging. And even I explained that you can assign a DOI to blog posts and make them citable. So this is how various research outputs can be cited, and explaining the importance of social media. But I don't really dwell really long on this, especially after what happened with Twitter. So I explained ResearchGate, and I like telling interesting stories about lawsuits associated with ResearchGate, and I'm also sharing some experience of my colleagues who tried sharing research outputs in repositories and ResearchGate in the same time, and actually Google Scholar picked up this research sooner than from repositories than from ResearchGate and academia. And also I give some advice how to do this. So this is about ResearchGate, how to choose social media. And sometimes I do this exercise about optimizing posts on social media, because many researchers, even when they post on social media, they're not using hashtags, they're not tagging their posts properly, and they don't ensure a proper visibility. So if you want to use social media, it's okay, but use it properly. So that's my advice. And I usually include, you can find a link to this exercise here, how to optimize. This is all about, yeah, this is so here I provide like a piece of text and I tell them just to use hashtags. So this is the post, this is the text that they need to improve. And I also suggest that they can use ChatGPT to do this. So ChatGPT would add hashtags for this. So it's a good use of ChatGPT. So sometimes we have a brief exercise how to do this. And then I wanted to show you another, how to monitor performance. It's about web statistics and citations. I usually don't include this if I'm not doing a full day training, because I usually don't have the time to cover this in shorter training, but this was a full day training, so I included this topic as well, about metrics. So I explained how difficult it is actually to track and to know the exact numbers. It's quite impossible. And then we had this workshop, and I wanted to show you this. This was a practical exercise, and it lasted for a full hour. So they had a task to work in groups to develop their visibility boosting strategy based on what they heard during the day. And I asked them to develop a persona, a use case, and then to explain what strategies they would use and to explain why they would use those particular strategies. And the idea was actually to explain them that they don't really need to pay marketing fees, that they don't really need to, that it's not enough to publish in the journals with high impact factors, etc., but that they need to take into account many different aspects. And in this Lithuanian workshop, it was very interesting that, for example, there was a group that decided to focus on citizen science approaches in their research, and they saw this as a good way. They were active in social sciences. They saw this as a good way to, and they developed a use case during this exercise, how to use citizen science to improve their visibility and their research profile. And also it was interesting that they were quite skeptical. Some of the groups were quite skeptical. We had a really interesting discussion about social media, and some of them found social media superfluous with all these approaches that can be used. So I'll stop sharing now. I'll share a presentation. You have some takeaways, but I've already mentioned all of them. So I wanted to show how you actually can engage and embed open science topics. Open science is really crucial. Researchers usually don't understand this, and you need to sell this topic to them. And you can find, for me, it's visibility. For me, visibility works perfectly well. Whatever I need to explain about infrastructure, about investing in infrastructure, about policies, about journals and journal policies and running open access journals, about institutional strategies, about individual strategies of researchers. So for me, this works the best. And I hope you have some buzzword and some, I don't know, trump card that you can use in your training, similar to visibility or something completely different.
Thanks a lot, Milica. That was excellent. Any questions, any reflections? And we're recording this session, but if you don't want to be recorded, just tell us and we'll pause the recording if you want to ask a question or if you want to comment, or maybe we could even stop the recording. What do you think, Milica?
I'm fine with any option. We will share everything, so you can reuse if you wish.